Well, we don't know for certain where Oregon is going to be playing its football in 2024. There is one thing we know for certain, though. Here we go.
You are Locked On Ducks, your daily podcast on the Oregon Ducks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, it is that time once again for Locked On Ducks. I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin. Thank you so much for making this your first listen or your first view of the day. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day and your number one source to stay up to date with the Ducks. If you have not already, like, comment, subscribe, rate, review, please and thank you wherever you listen to or watch this show. Since I've been really asking for subscriptions on YouTube, we've been ticking up. We're getting closer to 3,000, which is where I would love to be by the time kickoff comes around on September 2nd. Oregon will be playing in the Pac-12 this year. What about next year? We don't know. We're talking about that and all this sort of stuff on the show and some Dan Lanning stuff. Because the one thing that we do know right now is that whichever conference, I think is the more appropriate way to phrase that. I'm sure my guy Bud and everydayer out there will correct me on the matter. Whichever conference Oregon is playing in 2024, the Big 10, the Big 12, the Pac something, who knows what we call it at this point in time. We know that Dan Lanning is going to be Oregon's head coach. So Dan Lanning's new contract has been released in full with the details. It has been approved by the Oregon board and the university and everything like that. It is all set in stone, signed, sealed, and delivered. And wherever Oregon is playing, and I am confident that they're going to be playing somewhere. I don't see them getting left behind in all this conference realignment craziness and such. Wherever they are playing, Dan Lanning is going to be their head coach. And it looks like Dan Lanning, as long as he continues to win and recruit at a high level, will be Oregon's coach for quite some time. So, Dan Lanning's contract extension, which did kind of come out of nowhere. I wasn't thinking about it. There was a good year one that took place a season ago. It was a good year. I know. Losing the rivalry game stinks. Dan Lanning knows that. He's fully aware. You don't have to sell him on it. He's aware they shouldn't have lost those two games. You can go look at his comments after both of them. He's very aware. He's also very aware of what it means to us as Oregon fans to beat those particular programs. And I would be pretty surprised if we lose both rivalry games again this season. But when you look at it holistically, you say, okay, 10-3, that was pretty good. I think Oregon was a better team in 2022. Still, I would like to see more growth. But I think the realignment piece is actually kind of key here. Because I believe that the Ducks, having, let's say, questions, shall we say, like everybody else, about where they're looking in the future, about where they're going to play their where they're going to play their football, what conference they're going to be in, I think they're looking for some sense of stability. Because if you don't know what conference you're going to be in or how good it's going to be or what you're going to be doing or anything like that, the one thing you don't want to have to worry about if you're Rob Mullins and our new President Schultz and everybody, you don't want to worry about who your head coach is going to be. And with this contract, we don't have to worry about that for the foreseeable future, barring wildly unforeseen circumstances. This contract, as I'll get to in just a moment, represents a real, hardened commitment from Lanning and the university to have a mutual partnership to try and succeed at the highest level that they can on both sides. So, the contract is extending him through 2028, which sounds like a lot, but he initially signed a 6-year deal, so it's actually just basically a new 6-year deal that starts this year. His salary is getting increased from $4.7 million to now $7 million, which puts him tied for 15th nationally with Kirk Ferentz at Iowa, who is one of the longest tenured coaches in all of college football, and Brent Venables at Oklahoma, which, as we know, is a blue blood program and has a lot of money. So paying him within the range of those sorts of programs, a combination of the two, I think, is what Oregon is seeking here. They would like to be the sort of blue blood that Oklahoma has been, and they're hoping Brent Venables will help them continue to be. That's a different conversation. But they would also love to have the longevity of Kirk Ferentz. So I think amidst, and the salary, by the way, goes up $200,000 a year every year from now through 2028, and there are a bunch of other incentives in there as well. But I think the reason that I bring up Kirk Ferentz and the reason that, the buyout is really big, which I'll get to in a second, why all of this I think took place fundamentally, is I don't think in the midst of conference realignment, Rob Mullins, the athletic director, and the rest of the department and alumni and boosters and everybody, supporters of the program, I don't think anybody wanted to have questions about, do we need to worry about our head coach potentially getting picked off by another school because we weren't willing to give him the sort of contract that solidifies him here, that keeps him 10 toes down, keeps him making the grass damn green in Eugene? Because why would you? If this whole debacle had not come about, I think there is a solid chance. I can't guarantee anything because we'll never know, but I believe there is a solid chance this contract might have waited until the end of season 2, until you pick up at least one win against a rival, until you appear in a conference championship game, until you make the defense at least closer to what we are all expecting he'll be able to make it into as time goes on. Because it certainly was not what we were hoping for in year 1, but I'm willing to give leeway on that front, but I expect to see big things in year 2. And now Dan Lanning is paid in a way that demands big expectations from us as fans, from media, everybody. Because he's the top 15 paid coach in the country. And look, there is an element of fairness to it because we are now paying him, or the school is now paying him, I guess, to the standard that we are all holding him to. We expect him. I've been talking about, and I once again had to push off the show with Brian. I promise that'll come tomorrow. Show on Saturday. Probably no show on Monday, barring some big change and whatnot that requires an emergency pod. But we are expecting, and we are framing the entire conversation about Oregon's recruiting class as, are they going to be top 10? They're sitting number 12 nationally. Do you know how many programs in the country would love to be like Oregon's program right now, recruiting-wise? Would love to have the number 12 class in the country and be saying, yeah, and a lot of them, because a lot of them, most of them, as a matter of fact, are not even capable of recruiting at that sort of level. But Oregon is. As Brian Smith has talked about, you have to be a grinder to do that. Dan Lanning has shown that he is. I think that's an element of why the board and Rob Mullins and everyone were comfortable giving the contract, given good but not unbelievably incredible, blew me away results in year 1 on the football field. I think the recruiting's a part of it. I think his youth is a part of it as well. You see the potential for growth in him as a coach. And yes, winning 10 games, including a bowl game and against a good North Carolina team, by the way, that has an NFL quarterback that he held under 30 points with that defense that we hope is going to improve. That is something that I think they also looked at and said, that's a feather in his cap. Not beating Oregon State and Washington in the fashion that they lost those games, those are feathers removed. But I remember a 2021 season in which we got trounced twice by Utah in 3 weeks. I watched us go out and beat Utah this past year, and Bo Nix was on one leg. I watched countless games in 2021 that were way closer than they needed to be. Which of those took place in 2022? I know the losses, but those are to good teams. You didn't lose to a 3-9 Stanford team. You were up 31-3 at the half. Number 12 BYU was feeling good after a 2-0 start. They had a 31-point lead in the third quarter at Autzen Stadium. Yeah, the Washington State game was crazy. Washington State's not a bad program. So I think there are plenty of merits that warrant giving Dan Lanning this extension. And the biggest thing that demonstrates the commitment is the buyout. Dan Lanning is not someone who would appear as a candidate on LinkedIn Jobs anytime soon, because these days every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business, and you want to be 100% certain that you have access to the best qualified candidates available. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs helps find the right people for your team faster and for free. Go in there, create a free job post in minutes, add the purple hashtag hiring frame to your profile, spread the word that you are hiring. Simple tools like screening questions make it easy to focus on candidates with just the right skills and experience so you can quickly prioritize who you'd like to interview and hire. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Had to be quick on the second segment sip. We got too much to get to. So, the biggest thing that I think should give Oregon fans assurance that Dan Lanning wants to be here is that the buyout is honestly the biggest change. The salary increase is notable. He goes from being like the 32nd highest paid coach in college football to tied for the 15th. That is a notable jump. But the first or second biggest thing here is the buyout on the contract. And this is where I think Mullins, in an evolving world of college football, wants to ensure that Lanning's going to be his guy wherever Oregon ends up going to play, and that other schools are not going to want to come in and try and take him away if he continues to succeed at a high level. So the buyout on his original contract by year 5 was going to be like $1 or $2 million. The way it is structured now is that if Lanning were to leave for another job anytime before 2029, his buyout is $20 million. Now, Matt Prame of 24/7 Sports had a good had a good set of lines in a tweet breaking down what that really means. If a school, because everybody's reaction would be, SEC schools have got $20 million. No, it's not $20 million. Because first, if you're firing your head coach, you have to pay his buyout money. That's tens of millions of dollars usually. Then you have to pay the buyout, and you have to pay Lanning's contract, which is $7 million a year. So making it harder to come and get this guy, I think, is rooted in the conference realignment space right now, and also that Mario and Willie Taggart both left sooner than the Oregon Athletic Department might have expected. And I heard this. Eric Scopel and I were talking. I was filling in yesterday on the Bald-Faced Truth for John Canzano, and Eric pointed out that the longest tenured coach since Mike Bellotti left has been 4 years, which is pretty crazy. It was 4 years of Chip, it was 4 years of Helfrich, 1 year of Taggart, and 4 years of Mario Cristobal. And I think Rob Mullins has looked at what Dan Lanning did in his first year, what he is capable of, the way he's recruiting, the way he runs the program, the energy that he gives off, the commitment he's made to the university, his involvement in the community and everything, and has said, we want this to be where you are establishing real roots here. This is where we'd like you to be. And Dan Lanning, perhaps because this is his first head coaching opportunity, they say your first is always different, right? It's an old adage, like your first love is always different. Might not be the only one you ever have, might not even be the longest one you have, but they say your first one is different. Maybe the same is true in coaching here, and that's what Dan Lanning is part of the reason that he's drawn to it. I can speculate from now until the end of time as to why, or I can just listen to what Dan had to say. The contract, by the way, also has it's 100% guaranteed, and it's got a bunch of incentives for 10 plus regular season wins, 11 or 12 regular season win seasons. You know what I'm trying to say. 11 or 12 win regular seasons. There we go. College football playoff appearances, all that sort of stuff that you would expect to be in there. But this is what Dan Lanning had to say about it. Quote, "In coaching, you dream to be at a place where you can both raise your family and win at a high level. Oregon has more than exceeded those expectations for my wife, Sophia, and our 3 boys, and this will ensure our boys can all graduate from the same school as we continue to grow roots in the community. I'm thrilled to be a part of a program that has a shared vision for how to stay on the cutting edge and achieve great success moving forward, and I am grateful to Phil and Penny Knight, Rob Mullins, and President Schultz for their faith and unwavering support of our program. Our relentless," it's written out PROGRAM, but we all know how he's saying it. "Our relentless pursuit of excellence for the Oregon football program will continue to include an innovative and aggressive approach to student-athlete support, world-class facilities, and all the program dynamics as we push forward, and I look forward to all the great days on the horizon for our student-athletes and Duck fans." Always love the shout-out to the fan base there from the head coach. Now, in 5 years' time, could it be an infamous statement? Sure. Of course, anything's possible nowadays. But this is a commitment from Lanning, and this is a commitment from Oregon that states very clearly, we would like this to be a partnership for as long as possible, and we see real potential here. And I do believe that this contract raises the amount of pressure that's on Dan Lanning for this season. If he gets this extension, raise, solidarity is kind of the word that I'm looking for. Continuity and such a solid commitment from the school to him as the head coach. If Oregon goes out this year and goes 8-4, that's going to come back down to the head coach. But if Oregon goes out this year and ends the regular season 11-2, Pac-12 champs, then they'll be looking pretty darn good. So those are the details on the contract, all of which I think are good. And I think that the timing of it pertains to the conference realignment component. So Oregon, at this time, as I record this show, it is 8:17 p.m. on I don't even know. July 27th is something. I need to look. I literally have to look at my phone to see what day of the week is. Thursday, July 27th. I haven't really left my office today, but for lunch and dinner, I really haven't left much. It's been a busy day. There have been a few things to follow. I was watching the Colorado presser. I was watching all that sort of stuff. So the crux of what is happening right now as I record this show is we don't know. It's that we don't know. And it's why I didn't lead the show with Big 12 versus Big 10. I talked about that on yesterday's show. Because we have no idea what's going to happen next. Who's going to jump? Is Oregon going to jump? Would Oregon jump? Should Oregon want to jump? These are all legitimate questions. But the Pac-12 put out a statement. It's one of these blanket unity, we're together, yada, yada, yada statements. Okay, whatever. Actions speak a lot louder than words because words are pretty empty at this point. It's about as empty as they could possibly be. So I would like, even in the midst of all this, I would still like Oregon to be in the pack because I like the traditional rivalries that still remain with Oregon State and Washington and the matchups with everybody else. And I still believe that Oregon is going to have great access to the playoff in the pack. Could I understand, as I laid out on yesterday's show, Oregon deciding to go to the Big 12? Absolutely. I could see it. There's a world in which that happens, and I say, yep, I see how they got to that point. But I don't know that that is a guarantee. Because here's one thing that you have to think about when talking about all this stuff. If you're just going to generally say, you got to get out, everybody's got to get out. Okay, lots of fan bases want that to happen. So the Big 12, now that they've added Colorado, they are now at 13 teams. How many do you think they can go to? Because the most anybody's got in the country is 16. You've got 14 in the ACC and I believe 16 apiece in the Big 10 and the SEC. So let's say 16 is the max. So the Big 12, reportedly, according to Brett McMurphy, is looking at 1 to 3 more teams to add to the conference in addition to Colorado. You can't have an odd number of teams. Make scheduling a nightmare. You don't have a travel partner. Myriad of reasons. Can't have an odd number of teams. Got to be even. So the Big 12 is going to continue to go hunting in the Pac-12. And maybe they'll end up shooting a duck. It felt kind of wrong to make that analogy, but it also felt kind of appropriate. We'll just kind of see. So capture a duck would have been a better word. But if they're going to add 1 to 3 more teams, look at how many schools are left here in the Pac-12. There are 9 of them. There are 9. There's been a lot of buzz about Arizona. Let's say, just for the sake of argument, that Arizona jumps to the Big 12, and now Oregon wants in. Who do they take with them? The school they share a state with? Or the school who they share the most valuable television commodity with from a football game standpoint? That's Washington. Who do they go with? I don't know. Then you have to ask yourself, well, if Arizona were to go, and if Oregon were to go, let's say it's Washington, is Utah just getting What, relegated back to the Mountain West? What about Arizona State? Is Arizona going to leave without Arizona State? I don't know. So I encourage you all to play these things out before saying this is what's going to happen or it's going to jump like that. You got to play it out. You got to give me a realistic world in which this happens, that domino falls, and then this one falls, and then this school or this organization acts in this way, and it makes sense for these reasons. Because I don't see a world in which Arizona leaves and then Utah and Arizona State go to complete the sweep of the quote-unquote four corner schools, and then Oregon, Washington, Stanford, and Cal are left to be the foundational four teams of a 10-team conference with 6 other G5s? Is that what you're saying? I don't know. What happens to Stanford and Cal amidst all this? I don't know. That's why I'm waiting for this stuff to play out, and I think there are a lot of different ways that it can go. When you're trying to get a part for your car, there's a lot of different ways that can go. So for a championship team, it's all about making sure every player is a perfect fit. It's the same when it comes to your vehicle. Every part needs to fit just right. So the next time you need parts and accessories, head to eBay Motors. With eBay Guaranteed Fit, you can be sure every part you need fits right the first time around. Just add your ride to My Garage and look for the green check to know if the part will fit or your money back. Just like in sports and conference realignment. Confidence is the name of the game. When you shop, look, they even start with the same 4 letters. Confidence, conference, in conference realignment, confidence is the name of the game. Just like when you shop on eBay Motors. With over 122 million parts to choose from, you'll be back in the game in no time. After all, it's easy to bring home a win when the right parts are guaranteed. Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. Get the right parts, the right fit, and the right prices on ebaymotors.com. ebaymotors.com. Let's ride eBay. Okay, so as always, you can continue sending me your thoughts. I will be around most of the day to respond to you, whether that's YouTube comments or you hit me up on Twitter at smalls_55 or at Locked On Ducks. I'll be traveling later tonight. I hope that I don't need to record a show for Monday. Recruiting episode coming out tomorrow to try to give some semblance of normalcy, which I'm about to do here to wrap up today's show because all this feels very weird. And frankly, it's hard to get out ahead of this stuff. And I could try to predict every way to Sunday how it all will go. But I think we've kind of discussed all the important points with regards to Oregon's future. I could see him staying in the Pac. I could see him being in the Big 12. But you got to have an actual scenario for every single team. Utah, Stanford, Cal, they're not going to just sit there. They're not going to just get left out. Maybe they'd add a bunch of G5s. I don't know. A lot of different ways that stuff could go. So let's talk about a normal football topic to wrap up today's show to make it feel normal, even though we know it's not. It's like in Mall Cop. Paul Blart Mall Cop, classic film from my childhood. Well, classic might be a stretch, but it was one that I watched pretty often and was pretty funny. Kevin James. What you do is you pull up with your right hip forward, placing your left hand on your back waist, giving the illusion, actually it's the other way around. Pull up with your left hip forward, placing your right hand on your back hip, giving the illusion that you have a gun, which you and I both know. We don't. See, I could come on and give the illusion of knowing what's going to happen. The truth is, I don't. So it's easier to just wait for the news and react to it. Not waste too much time thinking about what could happen, but doesn't mean things aren't important. So, mailbag always open. It's chock full. We're getting backed up too because all this news is crazy and affects Oregon and such. So there are a lot of questions in there, but guess what? We still got plenty of time before the season starts. Promise I will get to all of them. I've actually, fun fact, just a little peek behind the curtain. I've had an entire show written out, like description and everything. I've had it written out for like 3 days now. Haven't used it. Probably going to record and air it sometime next week because it's relevant to the season. But guess what? The news is not super relevant to the season. But this is on the subject of Dan Lanning and his future as the head coach of the Ducks, which it looks like he's going to be. This from Nathaniel. Hey, Spencer, I'm sorry to flood you with all these questions. Goodness gracious, what a silly proposition. What? Sorry to flood me with all these questions? Answering mailbag questions is probably my favorite part of this show. Don't ever apologize for doing something great like that, especially when it's an insightful one. It'll die down, I promise. I hope it doesn't. Here's another one you could use. Our hit rate with 4 stars from 2020 and 2021 was abysmal, but that's partly due to COVID, which hurt evaluations and it being Mario's guys. It's also partly due to the portal, which is still around. So what should we be aiming for from 2022, 23, 24? I'm kind of anticipating a low hit rate with the 2023 D-line guys because there's so many. So let's just take the 2023 defensive line recruits, whether it's D-line or edge, of which there are 10 or 11 of them. They all have 3 or 4 stars. They all have potential. I could foresee a world in which any of them become good players for the Ducks. I could make the justification. I could get Brian on here right now, maybe not literally, but metaphorically, and we could talk about how does this guy become an all-conference caliber player. Yeah, he's got the explosion. He's got the get-off. He needs to work on this. He needs to get better at that. All this stuff has to click. But the question you're asking here about hit rate on these sorts of kids, the sorts of players that we expect Dan Lanning to bring in and year out and are the foundation of the 2024 recruiting class, by the way, of those 11 defensive linemen. I'm going to pull them up right now just so I don't miss any. So you've got Mateo Uyunglele. You have Johnny Bowens. That's 2. You have Tatum Tuioti. You have, just scrolling down the list here, Mikhail Gardner. You have Jaden Moore. You have Tavita Pamee. That's 6. You have Blake Purchase. That's 7. Terrence Green, 8. Ashton Porter, 9. Amari Washington, 10. So maybe it was 10. 10, 11, whatever. Of those players, when you're talking about hit rate, you got to put that in context. So think about the Oregon's defensive line right now. Popo Aumavae and Brandon Dorlus were, I believe, both 3-star recruits. I know Brandon Dorlus was, and he's an all-conference caliber player. But Popo, who was a first-team All-Pac-12 guy once upon a time when he was healthy, was a 3-star recruit himself. So the hit rate, so to speak, on those guys depends on what you're classifying as a hit, as success. Because there are some guys like that who will develop into big-time starters, major contributors, plus players. There are other guys, like Keon Ware-Hudson was a 4-star recruit. I wouldn't consider him a bust. He's been a regular player for the Ducks. He makes a play every now and then. He's not a dominant all-conference caliber player, but to think about what you see as successful, what's a what's a hit on a 4-star recruit? Is it rotation player? Is it starter? Is it all conference caliber guy? I would say of those 10 defensive linemen over the course of their careers, whether in their redshirt freshman seasons, sophomore seasons, junior seasons, senior seasons, whenever, I would say a reasonable expectation of developing those guys at a rate that is, acceptable in terms of developing players and developing talent and actually, being honest with recruiting pitches as well. I'd say if 4 of them end up being either regular rotation guys or plus starters, meaning they're above average or all conference caliber, I would say that's doing pretty well. Because there are so many factors that can lead a kid to not realize his full potential. Not vibing with the coaching staff, position coach leaves, something goes off in his home life or anything like that. There's so many factors at play. Injuries, that can be a part of it. So of those 10, I would say 4, and we don't know which 4. It's why we talk about all of them. It's impossible to know which 4. Because there's so many things that go into, what's going to allow a kid to be successful and, maximize his potential as much as he possibly can. All those kids have talent. All those kids have potential, making them, it's not going to be 10 for 10. It's just not. I don't know which ones it's going to be. I don't know which ones will be among the 4 or maybe 5. I don't know. But I think in the portal era, I think 4 is probably a good goal to strive for, just among the defensive linemen. But it's why you recruit several players of talent at every position. It's why you recruit as much talent via the portal as you can. Depth, having rotations, having competition, all of that stuff is good for your roster. And at the end of the day, what we're looking for is, from a recruiting class for Oregon's 2023 cycle that had 19 early enrollees and 10 fall enrollees who are coming, 29. Gosh almighty. you probably only have 2 or 3 all-conference caliber players in there. Again, impossible to know who those guys could be. And of the 29, there is a real solid chance that only 6 or 7 end up playing, significant minutes throughout their career. On the flip side, we could look back and say it's 17 to 18. We could look back and say it's 24. There's an element of randomness there, but with the portal, not all the kids are likely to stick around. That's just the way that it is. It's the way that it's going to be. Don't have to like it, but that's the way it is. So I think that's kind of the range. Is like if you recruit, for every, and again, it varies by position group as well. Because, of those 10 defensive linemen, I expect, 4 of them to be real positive plus contributors, meaning heavy rotation guys, starters, above average starters, or all conference players. I expect, about 4 of them. And if we get more than that, that's great. That means Oregon's doing really, really well. So I hope that answers your question enough. Last one here, fun question from Rob. My man Spencer, hope you're enjoying the Northwest summer. I am. The Pacific Northwest summers, man, they're just goated beyond belief. As much as we all hope you're enjoying the Northwest summer as much as we all enjoy waking up knowing we got some duck talk each morning. Appreciate you. If you could go back in time and be at any game, what would it be and why? Was it a game or player that hooked you on the Ducks? Second question is the one I'm going to answer first. Was it a game or player that hooked me on the Ducks? I'd say Kellen Clemens was probably the player. Jeremiah Johnson as well. Jonathan Stewart, Dennis Dixon. Those were the players that hooked me early. I don't think there was a particular game. I just love the sport. I just love the game. I love the Ducks. I was in Oregon, so I grew up going to games from the time I was a little kid. So I think that was a component as well. If I could go back in time and be at any game, give me 2010 Stanford at Autzen Stadium. Down 21-3, won by over 20 points. That was a Chip Kelly, Nick Aliotti special. You're down, I think, 28-17 or 28 to something at the half. Allow 3 points in the second half and just keep on scoring. Appreciate everyone listening. I'll see you next time. Have a wonderful rest of your day and a great weekend. And as always, always go Ducks.